first sail of post-lockdown, and we're heading west from Dartmouth. Behind us in the distance there is Start Point, and we're beating hard on the wind. Beautiful conditions. We've got about 12-14 knots of wind and pretty flat sea, so can't be bad.
Our cruise began from our home port in Dartmouth, and we sailed west into the prevailing winds, past Start Point, Salcombe, Bolt Head, and onwards towards Plymouth. Start Point is a tidal gate with something of a fearsome reputation. Currents can reach over 4 knots here, so it's really important to consult the tide tables and to pass the point at slack tide. We sailed on westwards, heading for one of our favourite south coast destinations, the River Yealm. Maunie of Ardwall is our Vancouver 38 pilot. One of only 13 built by North Shore Yachts of Itchenor. She was launched in 1997 and we bought her in 2009. She's a cutter-rigged, heavy displacement blue water yacht. Once we'd completed a big refit, we lived aboard her for 6 years from 2012 and sailed her across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. We finally arrived in Australia in 2017 and then shipped her back to the UK the following year. Diane's a great sailor and was clearly enjoying being back at the helm. We're biased, of course, but we think she's one of the best cruising yachts around. So we completed another refit last year to replace her teak decks and to have her hull professionally repainted. Our wind instruments showed us having about 14 knots of apparent wind, which is about 11 knots true. But with a calm sea, it was still enough to see the boat making a very nice 6.6 knots across the land, and that's without any tidal assistance at this stage.
So I thought I'd give you a bit of a tour down below.
The pilot house delivers incredibly good visibility and security, and we have additional instruments here, including an autopilot controller and our GPS chart plotter and radar display. On long passages, particularly on cold, dark nights, this is just a great place to keep watch. Heading forward from the saloon, you step down a couple of steps into the linear galley. It's set low in the hull and close to the mast, so suffers the least movement when the boat's sailing in big waves. Up in the bow is the forward cabin with a double V berth and plenty of storage space. The black bag is our spinnaker. Further aft on the port side opposite the galley is the forward heads, the bathroom. It's got lots of space for a shower, toilet and sink. Oh, and the angle of water from the tap is a pretty good indicator of the angle of heel of the boat, as you can see here. Further aft is the midships cabin. The double berth rather cleverly fits underneath the seating area of the pilot house above, and being in the centre of the boat, this cabin is comfortable even in really big waves. A digital display here confirms that the solar panels have topped up the 3 house batteries thanks to the bright sunshine. Back in the saloon, the 52 horsepower 4-cylinder Yanmar diesel engine sits beneath the floor, leaving space behind the steps to access the aft cabin. Here we have a double quarter berth, plus plenty of stowage. It's also a good cabin in bad weather. It's secure, doesn't bounce around too much. And there's another sink and toilet here to make this a compact ensuite visitor's cabin. There's even a small technical room here which houses the 4 kVA AC generator, diesel powered, a water maker to convert seawater into fresh water, and stowage for tools and spares. Back at the Ray Marine plotter there's lots to see. Zooming out we can see Bolt Head and Salcombe, and the grey triangles are AIS position transmissions from other boats and ships. It's a safety system which is absolutely fantastic. The electronic chart also has some current stations which predict the tidal flows at certain points of the chart. Here at the real time of 11:46 it's showing slack water, as we'd planned, but in 90 minutes the current will be running westwards at about 1.1 knots, giving us a good push towards our destination. The prediction tool shows that the current will peak at about 1.8 knots here, and then will go slack before turning against us at about 17:15. The good news is we should be well into harbour before then. It's really vital to plan your coastal passages to take advantage of the tidal flows around this part. It's so demoralising to be sailing at 6 knots through the water, only to have 2 knots of current pushing back against you.
So we've got a red flashing AIS signal here, which means that it's going to come close. So if I click on here, fishing boat called William Harvey, and he's going to be 500 feet away in 2 minutes, so that's really too close. He should give way, but let's go have a look. The reason why he's going so close, he's going to pick up his lobster pots. You sometimes assume that it's just going to be one lobster pot, but actually there's a whole string of them. So he's a Penzance boat. So we've got the autopilot running here. You have a wind vane mode, so effectively the autopilot follows the wind. So if we get a lift or a header, it'll just move the boat with it, which is fine. You've got to be careful with that though, because if you go in a big wind shift, it might take you somewhere you don't want to go.
As we head further west, the wind builds in strength, just as the forecast predicted. The tidal current running with us tends to push up short, steep, wind against tide waves, so we're starting to see some spray breaking over the deck. We've put one reef in the mainsail. It reduces our sail area and reduces the heeling, but we're still making really good speed along the coast. Maunie has a relatively low freeboard hull, so the side decks get a good washing when it's like this. We're approaching our destination, the River Yealm, and we'll be glad to be in. Coming into the River Yealm requires some pretty careful pilotage. You need to keep well to starboard to avoid the shallow river bar, and then move across to the port to avoid the shallows of Misery Point. Once into the river itself, it's full of moorings, and you can see ahead the houses of Nos Mayo and Newton Ferrers, the villages on the starboard side. Luckily there are a couple of visitor pontoons, and on this particular day we were easily able to find a space to moor up.
37 miles done in just under 6 hours, so that's quite a respectable average. Time for a gin and tonic. Cheers.
The following morning was drizzly and windy, so we decided to sail round to Plymouth, past the breakwater, and we anchored for lunch at a spot called the Barn Pool. It's a good place to watch the military practicing, but their wake makes it a rolly anchorage, so after lunch we sailed on up the Tamar. We passed the Royal Navy base of Devonport, and there's a guard boat keeping you clear of going too close to the frigates and destroyers. And then we moved on up the river and branched off into the River Liner. The upper sections of the river are pretty shallow here, but on a rising tide we made it up to a deeper anchorage called the Dandy Hole, which is pretty and incredibly well sheltered from all wind directions. A couple of days later and the sunshine returned, and we had a lovely light northerly to sail back to Dartmouth. We flew our cruising chute, which is known as the Irish flag for pretty obvious reasons. By mid-afternoon we were back on our mooring in the River Dart. It had been a really great Shakedown cruise.